The overhead lights in Ironwood's main briefing hall cast hard shadows across 300 faces. Lydia Brennan stood alone in the center of the concrete floor, hands at her sides, breathing steady despite the weight of every eye fixed on her. She'd walked this hall 1,000 times, past the American flag hanging motionless in the corner, past the memorial wall with its brass plates bearing names of the fallen, past the rows of folding chairs where contractors sat during mission briefings, their faces focused, professional, alive with purpose. Now those same contractors filled every seat, standing room only along the back wall, silent, waiting, but not for a briefing, for judgment. Thorne Caldwell stood at the podium, his division chief uniform pressed, sharp posture, military straight. Lydia's husband of 5 years. The man who'd pursued her with patient devotion when she was 22 and convinced her that partnership meant something, that marriage meant safety. His voice carried across the hall with practiced authority. 6 weeks ago, Lydia Brennan accessed classified operational files. The massive screen behind him flickered to life. Digital logs scrolled past, line after line of access records, each one time-stamped, each one damning. Operation Red Canyon. Contractor team operating in Syrian territory. The image changed. Mission brief, deployment orders, intelligence assessments, everything a hostile force would need to turn an operation into an ambush. These files were accessed using her credentials, from her workstation, Terminal 7 Delta in the analysis center. Lydia watched the screen, watched her login ID appear next to each file access, watched the timestamp 11:43 p.m., watched the download indicator showing 47 minutes of file extraction. She'd been home that night, badge reader proved it. She'd left the building at 6:30, same as always. Microwave dinner, read analysis reports in her apartment, fell asleep by 10, but the log said different. The log said she'd been there, working late, stealing secrets. Thorne advanced to the next slide. Encrypted messages were transmitted from her workstation to an unknown recipient. We've traced the communication pathway through 3 proxy servers before the trail went cold. More evidence on screen, message headers, routing information, technical details that meant nothing to most of the audience, but everything to those who understood network forensics. Lydia understood. She'd written the security protocols that were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of breach. Financial investigation revealed deposits to an offshore account. Banking records now. Account number partially redacted for security, but the social security number visible. Hers, $150,000. 3 deposits over 6 weeks, $50,000 each. 48 hours after this access, our team was ambushed. The screen changed again. Mission photos. Aftermath images that made several contractors in the audience look away. 3 body bags being loaded into a transport helicopter. Davis, Reeves, and Chen killed in action when hostile forces demonstrated detailed knowledge of our team's insertion point timing and tactical approach. Thorne's voice remained steady, professional, but Lydia heard the edge beneath it, the performance of grief that would play well to this audience. 2 additional contractors captured, their current whereabouts unknown, presumed executed after interrogation. Silence in the hall, the kind of silence that pressed against eardrums. That made breathing seem too loud. Client intelligence was sold to hostile forces. American lives were traded for profit. Thorne stepped away from the podium, walked slowly across the front of the hall, every movement calculated for maximum impact. The evidence is comprehensive. Digital forensics place her at the terminal. Financial records show payment. The timeline is exact. And the result? He stopped, looked directly at Lydia. 3 of our brothers are dead. 2 more are suffering God knows what torture, because someone in this room decided contractor lives were worth less than a bank deposit. The air in the hall shifted. Lydia felt it like a physical thing, the way 300 people collectively decided she was guilty, the way their judgment settled onto her shoulders like weight that would never lift. A voice from the crowd, female, trembling but clear. I saw her. Heads turned. Lydia knew that voice. Rosalind Hayes, senior analyst. Brilliant, kind, the woman who'd mentored Lydia for the past 8 months, who'd helped her navigate complex threat assessments, who'd become something close to a friend in a company where friendship was rare. Rosalind stood from her seat in the 3rd row. Pink hair pulled back, professional, face pale, eyes red like she'd been crying. I was working late that night, reviewing Middle East threat assessments. I saw Lydia at her terminal in the analysis center. She looked at Lydia. Genuine anguish in her expression. It was around 11:30. I remember because I'd been about to leave. I saw her and I thought she was just being dedicated, staying late to help with the Syria brief. She looked startled when I said hello, quickly minimized her screen. Rosalind's voice broke slightly. I didn't think anything of it then. We all work odd hours, but the timestamp, it matches exactly. She sat down. Someone in the crowd put a hand on her shoulder, comforting the traumatized witness. Lydia wanted to speak, wanted to say that Rosalind was lying or mistaken or manipulated. But what could she say? The evidence was there. The witness was credible. The timeline matched perfectly. Marcus Caldwell rose from his seat at the head table. 58 years old, former Delta Force commander who'd built Ironwood from nothing into one of the premier private military contractors in the industry. A man who'd attended Lydia's father's memorial service 15 years ago, who'd hired her personally because Arian Brennan had been his friend. Lydia Brennan, his voice carried the weight of 30 years commanding men in combat. Not loud, didn't need to be. You had access we granted in trust. Security clearance earned through 5 years of exemplary work. You betrayed both. Lydia met his eyes, saw no warmth there. No trace of the man who'd told her at her wedding that she reminded him of her father. Sharp mind, clear ethics, natural analyst. I didn't do this, sir. The words came out steady. She'd practiced staying calm under pressure her whole career. Analysts didn't panic. They processed information, found patterns, solved problems. But this wasn't a problem that analysis could solve. Evidence says otherwise. Marcus gestured to the screen. Your credentials, your workstation, your financial records, your physical presence verified by witness. 3 contractors dead, 2 captured, $47 million in lost contracts in legal liability. He paused. Do you have any defense beyond denial? Lydia's mind raced through possibilities. The credentials could have been cloned. Sophisticated actors could fabricate access logs. The bank account could have been opened by someone with her social security number. The witness could be mistaken about identity in low light. All true, all technically possible, all utterly unconvincing without proof. Someone with administrative access could have fabricated these logs, could have cloned my credentials, could have. Huteon, Marcus's question, cut through her speculation. Who had motive to frame you specifically? Who had capability to execute this level of deception? Who benefits from your destruction? Lydia had no answer. She'd thought about this question for 6 weeks. Since the day federal investigators showed up at her apartment with a warrant. Since the day Ironwood security escorted her to this compound and informed her she'd face internal tribunal before federal prosecution. 6 weeks thinking. 6 weeks analyzing. 6 weeks trying to find the pattern that would explain how her entire life had been dismantled with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of her habits, her access, her vulnerabilities. She had theories, suspicions, but nothing concrete. I don't know yet. Wrong answer. She saw it in Marcus's face, in the way several contractors in the audience shook their heads, in the way Thorne's expression shifted to something that might have been pity if she didn't know better. Then we proceed to judgment. Marcus looked at the panel of 3 senior executives seated at a table beside the podium. VP Operations, VP Legal, Chief Financial Officer, all men Lydia knew professionally, all looking at her like she was a stranger. The evidence is substantial. Digital forensics are clear. Financial records are documented. Witness testimony corroborates technical data. The result is catastrophic loss of contractor lives and company reputation. He turned back to Lydia. Lydia Brennan, you are hereby stripped of security clearance, facility access, and all operational privileges. You will be held in detention pending formal tribunal and transferred to federal authorities. The words landed like blows, each one precise, each one permanent. But Marcus wasn't finished. However, the single word made the hall go quiet again. Waiting. Betrayal of contractor trust blood of our people carries additional consequence under Ironwood protocols established in 2019. 2 personnel in medical uniforms entered from a side door. They carried a metal case, medical equipment, the kind used for field procedures when anesthetic and sterility mattered, but comfort didn't. Lydia's stomach went cold. Marcus continued, his voice unchanged. Procedural, like he was reading from a manual. Compromised personnel receive permanent implant. Biotracker that broadcasts location continuously. Cannot be removed without triggering toxin release, lethal within 90 seconds. Blocks access to all secure systems permanently through electronic signature. ensures the individual can never threaten another organization in our industry. He gestured to a chair in the center of the floor. Metal, restraints built into the arms. Additionally, chemical brand applied at implant site. Permanent visible mark. Public record of judgment. The medical personnel set up their equipment with efficient movements. Antiseptic, syringes. The implant itself barely larger than a grain of rice, but Lydia knew the technology, knew it was real, knew what it meant. You could never work in security again, never hold clearance, never enter a facility that screened for these signatures. The implant was a life sentence to irrelevance in the only profession she'd ever known. Two security contractors approached. Lydia recognized them. Patterson and Williams, men she'd worked with on threat assessments, men who'd asked her professional opinion on operational security. Now they gripped her arms. Not rough, but firm, inevitable. They guided her to the chair. She didn't resist. What would be the point? 300 people watching. Armed security throughout the hall. Federal charges waiting regardless of what happened here. She sat. Patterson secured the restraint on her left arm. Williams the right. Metal cuffs locked with quiet clicks that echoed in the silence. The medical technician approached. Female, maybe 40. Face professionally neutral. Left forearm, please. Lydia extended her arm as much as the restraint allowed. The technician swabbed the area with antiseptic. The chemical smell cut through the recycled air of the hall. Then came the local anesthetic injection. Sharp sting. Spreading numbness. Lydia kept her eyes on the far wall, on the memorial plaques, on the names of contractors who'd died in real operations. Real combat, real sacrifice. Not this. The technician made a small incision. Quick, precise. Lydia felt pressure but not pain. The anesthetic working. The implant slid under her skin. Smaller than she'd imagined. Barely visible. But she felt it. Foreign object in her flesh. Permanent marker of guilt she didn't carry. The technician sealed the incision with surgical adhesive. Then came the brand. Chemical compound in a syringe. The technician drew the letters carefully on Lydia's skin just above the implant site. Dark blue ink that would react with the lower layers of skin. Permanent as a tattoo, but deeper. Couldn't be removed without extensive surgery that would leave worse scarring. Compromised. The letters formed slowly, each one deliberate, each one visible to everyone in the hall watching on the large screen that now showed close-up of the procedure. Lydia's jaw tightened. She wouldn't scream, wouldn't give them that. The anesthetic helped, but she felt the burn of the chemical reaction, felt her skin accepting the mark that would define her for the rest of her life. When the technician finished, she activated the implant with a handheld device. A quiet beep. Implant online, biometric signature locked to subject. Removal will trigger toxin release. Lethal within 90 seconds. No antidote. The technician looked at Marcus. Procedure complete, sir. Marcus nodded, looked at the assembled contractors. Let all witness. This is the consequence of betrayal. She will carry this mark, this tracker, this permanent exclusion from our profession for the remainder of her life. He gestured to Patterson and Williams. Take her to detention. They released the restraints, helped Lydia stand. Her arm throbbed where the implant sat beneath skin. The brand was already visible, dark blue letters stark against pale skin. She'd wear long sleeves for the rest of her life. But everyone in this industry would know, would check, would see. Patterson and Williams walked her toward the exit. 300 contractors watching in silence. No one spoke. No one looked away. Lydia kept her head up, kept walking, kept breathing. As they reached the door, she heard Margaret Brennan's voice from somewhere in the crowd. The woman who'd found Lydia 15 years ago, who'd raised her after Arian died, who'd been the closest thing to a mother Lydia had known since age 12. Margaret said nothing, made no sound, offered no defense. Lydia didn't turn to look, couldn't bear to see that face, couldn't bear to see if Margaret believed the lies too. The door closed behind them. The hallway beyond was empty, fluorescent lights humming. Their footsteps echoed on polished concrete. Stairs are this way. Patterson's voice was neutral, professional, like he was escorting any prisoner to detention, like they hadn't shared coffee in the break room last month, like Lydia hadn't helped him prepare a security assessment that prevented a breach in the Africa operations. None of that mattered now. They descended stairs, down, down, deeper into the compound that had been built into Montana hillside. The temperature dropped with each level. The air grew damp, smell of stone and old metal. Ironwood's detention wing occupied converted silver mine shafts beneath the main facility. 12 cells carved into rock. Originally designed for hostile subjects awaiting interrogation. Also used for contractors under discipline. Lydia had written the security assessment on this facility 2 years ago, had recommended improvements to ventilation and lighting, had noted that extended detention in these conditions would be psychologically damaging. Her recommendations had been noted and filed, never implemented. Budget constraints. Now she'd experienced those conditions firsthand. The guard station came into view. Jenkins sat at the desk. Older contractor, 20 years with Ironwood. He looked up as they approached. His expression didn't change when he saw Lydia. New resident, Patterson nodded. Direct from tribunal. Marcus wants maximum security protocols. Jenkins pulled out a clipboard, started filling in paperwork with mechanical efficiency. Name, rank, charges. Brennan Lydia, former senior analyst, espionage, conspiracy, accessory to murder of Ironwood contractors. Hearing the charges spoken aloud made them more real, more permanent. Jenkins wrote everything down, then looked at Lydia directly for the first time. Cell 6, no contact with other detainees, meals delivered through slot, 1 hour exercise per day in isolated corridor, medical check weekly, lawyer visitation subject to Marcus's approval. He stood, retrieved a ring of keys from the wall. This way. The corridor stretched ahead. Stone walls, fluorescent lights spaced too far apart, shadows pooling between, heavy steel doors with small observation windows. Most cells appeared empty, but Lydia heard sounds, breathing, movement. Someone was housed in cell 9. She caught a glimpse of shadow through that observation window. Jenkins stopped at cell 6, unlocked it with an old-fashioned key. The modern biometric systems didn't extend down here. Too much risk of malfunction in the damp environment. The cell was 6 by 8 feet, concrete slab for a bed, steel toilet, sink with single cold water tap. That was all. Inside, Lydia stepped through the doorway. The cell was cold, maybe 45 degrees. She was still wearing the business casual clothes from the tribunal, slacks and blouse, no jacket, no sweater. They hadn't given her time to get personal items from her apartment. The door closed with a heavy metallic sound. Lock engaged. Final. Absolute. Jenkins' face appeared at the observation window. Federal authorities arrive in 3 days for transfer. Make yourself comfortable until then. His footsteps faded down the corridor. Lydia stood in the center of the cell, looked at her forearm. The chemical brand was still fresh, still burning despite the anesthetic wearing off. Dark blue letters that would never fade. She sat on the concrete slab. It was as uncomfortable as it looked. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, tried to conserve body heat in the cold air. 3 days until federal transfer, then trial, conviction, prison, for crimes she didn't commit. She'd done everything right, found the pattern of intelligence breaches, reported to Thorne through proper channels, trusted the system to investigate. Instead, the system had destroyed her. Lydia closed her eyes, let herself acknowledge the full weight of what had happened. Let herself feel it for 30 seconds. Fear, rage, despair. The crushing knowledge that no one believed her, that evidence had been fabricated so perfectly she couldn't prove innocence, that her entire future had been erased in one tribunal session. 30 seconds. Then she opened her eyes, pushed the emotions back down, started thinking. Analysis was what she did, what she'd always done, since she was 12 years old and watched her father die in a firefight near the Canadian border. Since Margaret had found her 3 days later alone and traumatized in the wilderness. Since she'd decided that intelligence work preventing deaths through information was the only way to atone for the lives lost. She wouldn't freeze again. Not like she'd frozen at 12. The cell was surveillance equipped, tiny camera in the upper corner, probably audio monitoring too. So she couldn't plan aloud, couldn't do anything that would alert the guards. But she could think. Someone had framed her with precision, had known her schedule well enough to choose a night when she'd left early, had accessed her credentials, had created the bank account using her identity, had planted a witness who would corroborate the timeline perfectly. That required resources, technical capability, inside knowledge of Ironwood systems, and motive. Why target her specifically? Lydia ran through possibilities. She wasn't operational, wasn't a threat to anyone's position, wasn't involved in company politics, just an analyst who did her job and went home. Except 6 weeks ago she'd found the pattern. Intelligence breaches before operations. Subtle, easy to miss. But there, someone with senior access systematically stealing mission data. She'd reported to Thorne. He'd told her he'd handle it, And 2 days later, the first evidence against her appeared. Federal investigators asking questions about offshore accounts. Ironwood Security pulling her access logs. The investigation that led to today's tribunal. Correlation wasn't causation, but it was suggestive. Lydia thought about Rosalind, the witness who'd placed her at the terminal, the analyst who'd arrived 8 months ago from an East Coast security firm, who'd been brilliant and helpful and friendly. 8 months. The intelligence breaches in her report had started 7 months ago. Timeline fit. But that didn't mean anything. Lots of personnel had joined around that time. Didn't prove connection. She needed more information. Needed access to records she no longer had. Needed time to investigate that she wouldn't get before federal transfer. A sound interrupted her thoughts. Quiet, rhythmic, coming from the cell wall to her right. Scratching. Deliberate, not random. Someone on the other side making contact. Lydia stayed still, listened. The scratching stopped. Then came a voice. Male. Weak, but controlled. Coming through some gap in the stonework that carried sound between cells. Stop pacing. Guards hear everything in these tunnels. Lydia hadn't been pacing. She'd been sitting perfectly still. But she understood the message. Someone in the adjacent cell was warning her about surveillance. She didn't respond. Didn't know who it was. Didn't know if this was some kind of test. The voice came again. You're Lydia Brennan, the analyst they branded traitor. How did he know her name? The tribunal was internal, wouldn't be public record yet. I know, the voice continued, because I know who really sold that intel. I've been trying to prove it for 3 years. 3 years, Lydia's mind jumped to dates, operations, incidents. 3 years ago, Mogadishu, Somalia, Delta contractor team. 3 operatives declared killed in action. Her brother Owen had been on that team, Owen Brennan, 27 years old at the time. Ironwood operator with 6 years experience. Specialized in counterintelligence operations. The only family Lydia had left after their father died. The official report said insurgent ambush. No bodies recovered. Hostile territory. 3 contractors lost, including Owen Brennan. Memorial service held at Ironwood compound. Marcus giving eulogy. Margaret crying silently. Lydia standing at attention in her analyst uniform, feeling like part of her had died in that Somali street. But the voice was suggesting something different. 3 years ago, Mogadishu operation. Delta contractor team. 3 operatives declared killed in action. Silence. Then officially. Lydia's breath stopped. The voice was familiar. She couldn't place it. 3 years older. Weakened by confinement. But somewhere in the cadence was something she recognized. Owen, long pause. Lydia wondered if she'd imagined it, if grief and stress had broken her mind, if she was hearing things that couldn't possibly be real. Then the voice came back, quiet, certain. Hey, little sister. Took me longer than I wanted to find you. Lydia pressed her hand against the stone wall, cold, solid, real. Owen was alive, her brother was alive, and he was in the cell next to hers. The impossibility of it threatened to overwhelm her. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt for not being there. 3 years of wondering if his death had been her fault somehow, if intelligence she'd missed could have prevented the ambush. All of it built on a lie. How? The question came out barely above a whisper. She didn't trust her voice. Explosion threw me into drainage canal during the ambush, Owen said. Washed downstream half a mile. Local fishermen pulled me out barely breathing. I let them think I died. Paid the fishermen to provide a body someone who died in unrelated violence. Same build, similar features. Enough for field identification when they recovered it 3 days later. Pause. The operation was compromised from inside Ironwood. If I came back, whoever sold us out would finish the job. So I went underground, started investigating. Lydia processed this. Operation compromised from inside. The same pattern she'd found 6 weeks ago. The same pattern that had gotten her branded and imprisoned. 18 months tracking financial networks. Trail led to Sentinel Strategic Group. Spent another 12 months infiltrating their operations as freelance contractor. Got close to their source inside Ironwood. Sentinel, one of Ironwood's primary competitors. Aggressive bidders, known for questionable practices. Got caught 2 months ago, Owen continued. Got too close to something. They handed me to Ironwood as detained hostile subject insurance to keep Marcus from investigating Sentinel too closely. They don't know who they gave him. I'm using different identity, different appearance. Marcus doesn't recognize me. You've been here 2 months. In cell 9, waiting for chance to reveal myself safely. to someone I could trust. When I heard them bring you down, when I heard your name, his voice tightened. I'm sorry I wasn't there. At the tribunal, I couldn't break cover. Not yet, not without proof. Lydia leaned her head against the wall, emotions warring inside her. Joy that Owen was alive, fury at what had been stolen from both of them, fear of what it meant that he'd been caught. You said you have proof about who sold the intel. Hidden outside the compound, dead drop location, names, transactions, communications, intercepts, financial records. Everything needed to prove Sentinel's penetration of Ironwood, including their inside operative. Hope flickered. Dangerous. Fragile. Who? Can't say it here. Surveillance. But I can tell you this, your frame job was personal. Whoever set you up knew intimate details. Your schedule, your credentials, your access patterns. That's not just Sentinel intelligence. That's someone close to you. Lydia thought about the people close to her, thought about who had intimate knowledge, who could have cloned her credentials, who would benefit from her destruction. Thorne, her husband, the man who'd convinced her that marriage meant partnership, who'd pursued her with patient devotion, who'd told her she was special. Division chief, senior access to all systems, knowledge of her schedule, ability to fabricate evidence. But why they'd been married 5 years? If he'd wanted her gone, he could have divorced her, could have transferred to different facility, could have done anything except this systematic destruction. Unless it wasn't about the marriage, unless it was about something else, the pattern she'd found, the intelligence breaches. If Thorne was involved, if he was the one selling operations, then her investigation had threatened him, threatened his conspiracy, threatened everything. So he'd eliminated the threat by destroying her so completely that no one would believe anything she said. The pieces fit, the timeline worked, the motive made sense, but she had no proof, just theory, just suspicion. I need to get out of here, she said quietly. Need to access your evidence. Need to prove it before federal transfer. Agreed, but getting out means disabling surveillance, bypassing guards, accessing facility without triggering alarms. And you have that implant now. They'll track you. Tracker has limited range in mineshaft. Rock interferes with signal. Administration building is 60 feet above us through solid stone. If we could disable relay node temporarily, we'd have window before backup system alert security. How do you know facility technical specs? I wrote the security assessment 2 years ago. She heard what might have been a quiet laugh from Owen's cell. Still the same Lydia, always studying, always preparing. Silence for a moment. Lydia heard distant sounds, footsteps somewhere above, water dripping, the ambient noise of a facility built into stone. There's something else you should know, Owen said. Whoever framed you doesn't want you alive long enough to talk to federal investigators. They want you dead. Make it look like suicide in detention, or prisoner violence, or accident. Clean end to loose thread. The cold in the cell seemed deeper suddenly, more threatening. How long do I have? Federal transfer is 3 days, but they'll move before that. Tonight probably, when guard rotation changes, when systems are stressed, when they can make it look natural. So we move first. We move smart. Wait for opportunity. Be ready. Lydia nodded even though Owen couldn't see her, then realized she'd been trained her whole career to wait for perfect opportunity, to analyze until certainty emerged, to be cautious. That caution had gotten her branded, had gotten her imprisoned, had gotten 5 contractors killed while she reported through proper channels and trusted the system. No more caution. What do you need from me? Your analyst asked mine. I have tactical knowledge. You have systems knowledge. Together we plan, together we move, together we prove what happened. Lydia glanced at her forearm, at the mark that would define her, at the mark that declared her compromised, traitor, guilty. She'd spent 15 years trying to prevent deaths through intelligence, trying to be the analyst who saw threats before they materialized, and she'd failed. The Syria team dead, 2 captured, 11 total if Owen's investigation was correct, but failure wasn't final. Not yet. Tell me about the surveillance coverage. Tell me about guard patterns. Tell me everything you've learned in 2 months. Owen's voice came back stronger, purpose in it. Guard shift changes at 0600, 1400, and 2200 hours. 3-person rotation. Jenkins is methodical. Torres gets bored. Murphy is aggressive. They overlap 20 to 30 seconds during handoff. Both distracted. Lydia listened, absorbed, started building mental map of facility, of schedules, of vulnerabilities. She'd written the security assessment. Owen had lived the surveillance for 2 months. Between them, they knew everything about this facility's weaknesses. And somewhere above them, someone was planning her death. Someone who'd framed her perfectly, who'd destroyed her professionally, who'd branded her permanently. Someone who'd underestimated what 15 years of analyst training could do when survival was the only objective left. She wouldn't freeze. Not this time. The cell was cold, the brand throbbed. The implant tracked her location. But her mind was clear. Her purpose was focused. And for the first time since federal investigators appeared at her doors 6 weeks ago, Lydia felt something other than despair. She felt ready. 3 hours had passed since the tribunal. 3 hours sitting in cold darkness, thinking, planning, remembering. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made Lydia freeze. Not guard rotation, wrong timing. Too quiet, someone moving carefully, trying not to be heard. Lydia stood, positioned herself beside the door. Not a fighting stance, she had no training for that, but awareness, readiness. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. Through the small observation window, she caught a glimpse of movement, someone looking in. Then the sound of a key turning in the lock. Lydia's pulse hammered. This was it. Whatever Owen had warned about. The attempt to silence her before federal transfer. The door swung open. Margaret Brennan stood in the doorway, 55 years old, Ironwood logistics coordinator for 20 years. The woman who'd found Lydia at age 12, who'd raised her, who'd been the closest thing to a mother she'd had since her real mother died. Margaret's face was pale, eyes red like she'd been crying, hands shaking slightly. Lydia. The word came out broken, uncertain. Lydia didn't move, didn't trust this, didn't know what was happening. I need to talk to you. I need to... Margaret stopped, seemed to struggle with something. I need to understand. Understand what? Why you did it? Why you would betray? Her voice cracked. Arian trusted Ironwood with his life. He died serving this company. And you sold our operations. You got contractors killed. The accusation landed like physical blows, each word precise, each one devastating. Lydia forced herself to stay calm, to think like an analyst, to see the pattern. Margaret believed it, genuinely believed Lydia was guilty. The psychological manipulation had worked completely. I didn't do it. The evidence was fabricated by someone with administrative access who knew exactly how to make it look real. Margaret shook her head, like she'd expected this denial, like it confirmed something. You always had an answer, always had an explanation. Even when you were 12, when we found you after your father died, you had a story for why you survived when he didn't. The words cut deeper than Margaret probably intended, touched the raw nerve that never healed. I froze. I was 12 years old and I froze in fear. He died protecting me. That's not a story. That's what happened. And I believed you, took you in, raised you, gave you everything Arian would have wanted for you. Margaret's voice hardened. And you repay that by destroying the company he died for. Lydia wanted to scream, wanted to grab Margaret and shake her until the manipulation broke. Until she saw truth instead of the fiction Rosalind had carefully constructed. But that wouldn't work. Margaret was too far gone, too convinced, too broken by the lies she'd been fed. Why are you here, Margaret? The question seemed to surprise her. She blinked, refocused. Thorne asked me to talk to you, before federal transfer, to see if you'd confess, if you'd tell us who you sold the intelligence to. The investigators need to know the full scope. There it was. Not maternal concern, not doubt about the verdict. Thorne had sent her to extract information, to confirm guilt, to tie up loose ends. And Margaret had come because she believed, because Rosalind's psychological operations had been that effective. Lydia felt something break inside her, something that had still been hoping, still been believing that maybe Margaret would see through the lies, would remember 15 years of raising her, would choose their relationship over the evidence. But Margaret had chosen wrong, just like everyone else. I have nothing to confess. I didn't do what they accused me of. Someone framed me perfectly, and you're helping them finish the job. Margaret's expression shifted. Something like pain crossed her face, but she didn't waver. I'm sorry you won't tell the truth. I'm sorry you're going to federal prison still lying. Arian deserved better than this. She turned to leave. Lydia's voice stopped her. Did Rosalind suggest you come talk to me? Margaret froze, turned slowly. What, Rosalind Hayes, did she suggest that talking to me might help? Did she mention that maybe I'd confess to you? Did she plant that idea over coffee or lunch or one of those friendly conversations you've been having? Margaret's face went pale. How did you? Because that's what she does. Psychological operations. Plant suggestions. Guide people to conclusions without them realizing they're being manipulated. She's been working on you for 8 months, making you doubt me, making you afraid of me, making you believe I'm capable of this. That's insane. Is it? Think about when you started feeling distant from me. Think about when you started doubting. Think about every conversation with Rosalind and ask yourself if she ever suggested things about me. Small things, subtle concerns, seeds of doubt. Margaret's hands trembled harder. Her eyes showed something confusion maybe, or the first crack in certainty, but then she shook her head, like she was physically rejecting the possibility. No, you're trying to manipulate me now, trying to make me doubt the evidence. That's what guilty people do. She left. The door swung shut, the lock engaged, and Lydia was alone again. She sat on the concrete slab, let her head drop into her hands. Everyone was gone. Everyone had chosen to believe the lies. Even Margaret, especially Margaret, the woman who'd found her, who'd raised her, who should have known her well enough to see through fabricated evidence. Gone. Owen's voice came through the wall. Quiet, careful. I heard, I'm sorry. Lydia didn't respond, couldn't find words. Margaret's been compromised. Rosalind's good at what she does. She finds vulnerabilities and exploits them. Margaret's vulnerability was you. Her guilt about not being your real mother. Her fear that she couldn't fill that role. Rosalind used that. Made Margaret doubt herself. Made her doubt you. Silence for a moment. Then Owen continued. But here's what Margaret's visit told us. Thorne is nervous. He sent her to extract information. To confirm you don't know anything that could threaten him. That means he's not completely confident. There's a crack in his certainty. Lydia processed this. Owen was right. If Thorne was completely confident in the frame job, he wouldn't need confirmation. Wouldn't send Margaret to fish for information. He was worried about something. What does he think I know? Same thing that got me caught. The financial network, the connection to Sentinel, the full scope of how many operations were compromised. He knows you're good at pattern recognition, knows you might have seen more than you reported. Wants to confirm you didn't document anything before you were arrested. I didn't. I reported what I found and trusted him to investigate. Which is why you're still alive. If you documented and distributed evidence, you'd already be dead. Suicide in detention. Tragic, but believable. The casual way Owen said it made Lydia's stomach turn. How long before they try? Soon. Federal transfer is in 3 days. They need you gone before then. Before you can talk to investigators. Before you can introduce doubt. So we move tonight. We move when opportunity comes. Could be tonight. We wait. We watch. We take the opening when it appears. Lydia nodded even though Owen couldn't see, then realized she needed to contribute something. She was analyst. She saw patterns. Time to prove that training was worth something. The guard rotation. Jenkins is on duty now. Shift change at 2200 hours. That's 4 hours from now. Torres comes on. He's less attentive, more likely to be distracted. Good. What else? The surveillance system. Camera in my cell has blind spot in the lower right corner. If I position myself there, they can't see what I'm doing. Audio monitoring is voice activated. Stays dormant unless sound passes threshold. We can whisper without triggering it. Useful. What about the maintenance corridor? You said there's a terminal there. Yes. Limited network access but connected to backup camera server. If we could access it during guard shift change, we'd have 20 to 30 seconds before someone notices we're out of cells. Not enough time? No, but if we could create a distraction, something that pulls attention away from detention wing entirely. Like what, Lydia thought. Ran through possibilities, facility layout, systems, vulnerabilities, fire alarm, suppression system activates. Guards have to verify no actual fire. Protocol requires physical check of all sectors. Takes minimum 15 minutes. How do we trigger fire alarm from inside cell? Lydia smiled despite everything. You've been loosening wire insulation. I saw the scratches on your wall. You're planning to create spark. Silence. Then Owen's quiet laugh. I forgot you notice everything. That's my job, noticing patterns. Can you create spark in your cell? Lydia examined her space. Metal bed frame, sink with exposed pipes, electrical outlet for emergency lighting. Maybe, if I can access the outlet, create short circuit. Risky, could electrocute yourself. More risky than waiting for someone to kill me. Owen didn't argue. Okay, fire alarm triggers. Guards respond. We move during chaos. Head to maintenance corridor, access terminal. Then what? Download camera footage from night of breach. Shows Rosalind and Thorne at my terminal. Proves my credentials were cloned. Proves I wasn't there. That proves you were framed. Doesn't prove broader conspiracy. You know, but it creates doubt. Gets federal investigators asking questions. Slows the prosecution. Buys time. Time for what? For you to access your dead drop. Your evidence about Sentinel. About the financial network. About everything. Owen was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot of steps. A lot of things that have to go right. You have a better plan. No. Then we go with this one. We wait for shift change. We create fire alarm. We move fast. We get evidence. We survive. Lydia stood, moved to the electrical outlet, examined it carefully. She wasn't an electrical engineer, wasn't trained in sabotage, was just an analyst who'd written security assessments and studied facility systems and noticed patterns. But sometimes that was enough. She pulled a thin metal strip from the bed frame, carefully worked it loose, shaped it with patience she'd learned from 15 years of detailed analysis work. The outlet had a crack in the cover plate, old facility. Maintenance deferred, small vulnerability. She worked the metal strip into the crack, felt for the connection points inside, found the gap between live wire and ground. One touch would create short circuit, would trigger fire suppression system, would start the chaos they needed. But timing mattered. Had to wait for shift change, had to wait for Torres to take over from Jenkins, had to wait for the right moment. So she waited, patient, methodical, ready. The digital clock in the guard station read 21:47. Lydia couldn't see it from her cell, but she'd been counting, tracking time with a precision that came from years of intelligence work where minutes mattered. 13 minutes until shift change. She sat against the wall metal strip concealed in her palm. The bed frame where she'd extracted it showed a small gap, but nothing obvious. Her forearm throbbed where the brand had been applied. The implant beneath her skin pulsed with each heartbeat. Owen's breathing from the adjacent cell had become rhythmic. Not sleep operators didn't sleep before operations, but controlled rest, conserving energy, staying ready. Lydia had never done this, had never been operational, had spent her entire career in analysis centers and briefing rooms, processing intelligence that other people risked their lives to gather. Now she was the operation. Footsteps in the corridor. Jenkins making his rounds. Standard procedure visual check on all detainees every 30 minutes. His face appeared at the observation window, scanned the cell, saw Lydia sitting against the wall, arms wrapped around knees, looking cold and defeated. Exactly what he expected to see. He moved on. Cell 7 empty. Cell 8 empty. Cell 9 Owen. The hostile subject detained 2 months ago. Jenkins lingered there slightly longer. Lydia heard him knock on the door. Federal transfer for you too. Day after tomorrow. Figured you'd want to know. Owen's response came muffled through steel. Non-committal sound that could mean anything. Jenkins continued his rounds. Back to the guard station. Lydia heard him settle into the chair. The click of a pen. Paperwork. 21:53. 7 minutes. Owen's voice came through the wall, barely audible. You ready? Lydia whispered back. Yes. Remember, once we move, we don't stop. Don't hesitate. We commit completely or we die. 21:56. 4 minutes until shift change. Lydia heard movement in the corridor. Different footstep pattern. Lighter, more casual. Torres arriving early. She heard voices at the guard station. Jenkins professional. Torres bored. Cell 6 Brennan. Federal transfer in 3 days. Keep visual checks every 30. Marcus wants her monitored closely. Got it. Cell 9 hostile subject. Same transfer schedule. Has been uncooperative. Don't engage beyond necessary checks. The conversation continued. Routine. Perfect. 21:59. 1 minute. Lydia positioned the metal strip against the outlet crack. Felt for the web. Found the angle. One push. That's all it would take. Torres and Jenkins talking. Shift handoff. Jenkins explaining status. 22:00. Now. Lydia pushed the metal strip into the gap. Felt resistance. Pushed harder. Contact. The spark was massive. The crack as electricity arced was like gunfire. The lights in her cell flickered, died, and the fire alarm screamed to life, not just in detention. Throughout the entire facility, sirens wailing, emergency lighting activating. Fire detected Sector B, evacuate immediately. Lydia heard chairs scraping at the guard station, Jenkins swearing, Torres asking what the hell was happening. Check the cells, make sure no one's hurt. Footsteps running, flashlight beams cutting through darkness. Jenkins reaching her cell first. His face appeared at the observation window. Saw Lydia sitting against the wall looking startled and scared. The metal strip already dropped behind the bed frame where shadows concealed it. You okay? Lydia nodded. Jenkins moved on, checking other cells. Torres behind him with fire extinguisher. The suppression system activated, water flooding from ceiling-mounted heads in the corridor, drenching everything, creating chaos, creating noise, creating the distraction they needed. Lydia heard the distinctive sound of Owen's cell door. Not unlocked, forced. Torres rushed past Owen's cell toward the alarm source. Owen's hand shot through the observation slot, grabbed Torres's collar, slammed his head against the doorframe. Once, twice. Torres dropped. Owen reached through, took the sidearm from Torres's holster, forced his cell lock with the tool he'd prepared. Then Lydia's cell door swung open. Owen stood there, 30 years old, bearded, scarred, thinner than she remembered, but unmistakably her brother. Alive. Move. No reunion, no emotion. Just operational urgency. Lydia ran, out of the cell, into the corridor where water poured from suppression system, where emergency lights cast everything in a red-tinged darkness. Owen moved like operator, fast, efficient, weapon in hand. They turned left, away from guard station, toward maintenance corridor. Behind them, Jenkins shouted, "Subjects escaping cell 6 and 9 lockdown." But lockdown took time. Owen reached the maintenance corridor door, shot the lock. Single suppressed round. The sound was swallowed by alarm sirens. The door opened. They were through. The maintenance corridor was exactly as Lydia remembered. Narrow, lined with pipes, terminal against far wall. Lydia ran to it, logged in using emergency maintenance credentials she'd memorized. Credentials that should have been changed but hadn't been because maintenance staff was lazy about protocol updates. The system accepted her login. She was in. Owen positioned himself at the door, weapon ready, watching for guards. 2 minutes, maybe less. Lydia's fingers flew across keyboard, navigating file structures she knew intimately. Backup camera server, archive directory, November 15th, night of alleged breach. Found it, started download to portable drive Owen handed her. Progress bar appeared. 47 minutes of footage. Download speed 3.2 megabytes per second. Estimated time 4 minutes 18 seconds. Too long. We don't have 4 minutes, Owen said. I need this footage. It proves I wasn't there. Download what you can. We move when I say move. 8%, 12%, 17%. Footsteps approaching. Multiple guards, running. They're coming, Owen said. 23%, 28%, 31%. The door at the far end burst open. 2 security contractors in tactical gear, weapons raised. Drop the weapon, hands up. Owen fired twice. Not at them above them, hitting the pipe junction overhead. Scalding steam erupted. The contractors fell back. Move Lydia 43%, 47%, 52%. Owen fired again, keeping guards suppressed. Lydia, we leave. Now. She looked at the screen. 58%. More than half, maybe enough. She yanked the drive out, stuffed it in her pocket. Go. They ran. Different direction. Deeper into maintenance quarters. Owen navigating from memory. The corridors were a maze. Pipes everywhere. Low ceilings. Water dripping from joints. Behind them, voices. Orders being shouted. Security teams coordinating. Ahead, Owen stopped at junction, listened, made decision. Left, emergency exit to surface, 100 yards. They went left. Corridor sloped upward. Older section. The emergency exit came into view. Steel door, push bar. Owen hit the push bar. The door swung open. Cold Montana air rushed in. Night sky, stars. They were through. Outside, the compound spread before them. Main building lit up. Security vehicles racing toward detention entrance. But no one looking at maintenance exit. The perimeter fence is 200 yards east, Owen said. We clear it, we're in wilderness. The implant, they're tracking me right now. Range limitation and facility bought us time. Outside, they'll pinpoint location within seconds. We move fast. They ran across open ground toward the fence line, every step expecting gunfire. Nothing yet. Chaos at detention wing had everyone focused there. The fence was 12 feet, chain link, topped with razor wire. Owen pulled wire cutters from jacket. He cut quickly, created gap large enough to crawl through. You first. Lydia dropped. Crawled. The gap was tight. Razor wire scraped her back. Drew blood. She was through. Owen followed. They were outside the fence. Free. Run. Due east. There's a creek 2 miles out. We follow it north. They ran into darkness. Into Montana wilderness. Into November cold. Behind them, the compound alarm changed pitch. Escape alert. Spotlights activated. Sweeping across grounds. Lydia ran harder. Her lungs burned. Her legs weren't trained for this. But adrenaline compensated. They reached tree line. Pine forest. Cover. Owen slowed slightly. Listen. They stopped, both breathing hard. Behind them, voices. Dogs barking. Vehicle engines. They'll track the implant, Lydia said. Yes, but terrain will slow them. They started moving again. Owen navigating by starlight. The forest was dense. Root systems made footing treacherous. The cold bit through inadequate garments, but they moved because stopping meant capture. After 20 minutes, they reached the creek. Running water. Cold. Wade in, walk upstream. Water will mask scent for dogs. They entered the creek. The shock of cold water was brutal, but it would work. They walked upstream, carefully. Rocks were slippery. Lydia's teeth chattered. Her body screamed warnings about hypothermia, but her mind stayed clear. This was survival. After another 20 minutes, Owen signaled stop. Listen, Lydia heard it. Helicopter. Thermal imaging, Owen said. They'll track us with thermal. Bodies show heat signature, even through tree cover. Can we hide from it? Not effectively. Then what? Owen looked around, then pointed to rock outcropping visible through trees. There, natural cave formation. Stone blocks thermal signature. If we can reach it before helicopter arrives, we'll have chance. They climbed out of creek, ran toward rocks. The helicopter sound grew louder. Searchlight visible through trees now. They reached the rocks, found the cave opening. Small, barely large enough for 2 people. They crawled inside. The cave was dark, cold, but it was shelter. The helicopter passed overhead, spotlight illuminating forest. So bright it turned night into day. Then it moved on. They'd hidden in time. Barely. Owen pulled out his phone. Old model, screen cracked, but functional. Still has battery. No signal here, but I can check files. He accessed something. Maps, coordinates. Dead drop is 8 miles north. Mountain terrain. We hike it, will take 6 hours minimum. 6 hours they'll be searching. Yes, but it's only chance. I need that evidence. Lydia pulled out the portable drive. I have evidence too. Camera footage showing Rosalind and Thorne at my terminal. Proves I was framed. Proves you're innocent. Doesn't prove broader conspiracy. We need both. He was right. Her evidence cleared her name. His evidence exposed the operation. Both were necessary. Then we hike. 6 hours. Owen nodded. Rest first. 10 minutes. Let body recover. Lydia leaned against cave wall, let herself feel the exhaustion, the pain, but also something else. Hope. They'd escaped. They had evidence. They were together. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was progress. Owen, yeah, thank you for surviving, for investigating, for being here. We're family, Lydia. That means something. It did. More than she'd realized during 5 years married to man who'd seen her as tool. 10 minutes, Owen said. Then we move. Lydia closed her eyes, let her body rest. Outside, the helicopter made another pass, searchlight sweeping, finding nothing. The stones shielded them. For now. Time to move, Owen said. They crawled out of cave, into forest, into darkness. East first to confuse pursuit, then north toward the dead drop. If they could reach it, if they could survive. Too many ifs, too many variables. But Lydia had learned something in detention. Sometimes you move despite the odds, despite the fear, because moving was better than waiting to die. They moved through forest, brother and sister, both marked, both hunted, both determined to survive long enough to prove the truth. Behind them, Ironwood compound blazed with lights, security teams organizing, dogs tracking, helicopters searching. Ahead, 8 miles of mountain wilderness, 6 hours of hiking, and evidence that would change everything, if they lived that long. Lydia kept moving, 1 foot in front of the other. Analysis had kept her alive in detention. Action would keep her alive now. The forest swallowed them. Darkness became cover. And somewhere ahead, evidence waited. Evidence that would prove everything, that would vindicate the dead and expose the guilty. They ran into night, into wilderness, but they ran together, and that had to be enough. Dawn broke cold and gray over the Montana mountains. Lydia and Owen had been hiking for 5 hours. 5 hours of rough terrain, freezing temperatures, and the constant awareness that pursuit was behind them. The dead drop location was ahead. A rock formation Owen had identified 3 years ago during his investigation. Hidden, secure, untouched. They approached carefully, Owen checking for signs of disturbance, finding none. He moved a specific stone, reached into the gap beneath, pulled out a waterproof case. Inside 3 USB drives, a satellite phone, documents sealed in plastic. Everything, Owen said. 3 years of investigation. Financial networks, communications intercepts, proof of Sentinel's penetration, names, dates, transactions. Lydia pulled out her own drive, the partial camera footage from the maintenance terminal. Together, she said, your evidence proves the conspiracy. Mine proves I was framed. Owen nodded, pulled out the satellite phone. We need to contact someone we can trust, someone outside Ironwood's reach. Who? Senator Patricia Morrison, Armed Services Committee, former Army JAG officer. She's been investigating private military contractor corruption for 2 years. I sent her preliminary information 6 months ago through encrypted channels. She's expecting more. He powered on the phone, waited for satellite connection, then dialed a number he'd memorized. The call connected. Owen spoke carefully. Senator Morrison, this is the source who contacted you about Ironwood security. I have the complete evidence package and a witness who was framed to cover it up. He listened, nodded. Understood. We'll meet you at the location we discussed. 24 hours. He ended the call, looked at Lydia. She's sending extraction, military helicopter. Meets us at coordinates 12 miles from here. Tomorrow at 0800 hours. Can we trust her? She's outside the conspiracy, has no connection to Ironwood Sentinel or Volkov, and she has the authority to protect us while federal investigation proceeds. Lydia felt something loosen in her chest. Not safety, not yet, but possibility. What about Marcus? He'll keep searching. Let him search. In 24 hours, we'll be in federal protective custody with evidence that destroys his son and exposes the penetration he allowed to happen under his watch. Owen started walking, north, toward the extraction coordinates. Lydia followed. Her body ached. Her forearm throbbed where they'd marked her. The implant transmitted her location to Ironwood security, but she kept moving. They hiked through morning, found shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin around noon, risked a small fire to ward off hypothermia. Owen went through the evidence systematically, showed Lydia what he'd gathered. Financial records showing payments from Volkov Global Defense to Sentinel Strategic Group, Sentinel's payments to offshore accounts controlled by Thorne Caldwell, communications between Thorne and Rosalind Hayes Kincaid, Sentinel CEO's daughter trained in psychological operations. The conspiracy was bigger than Lydia had imagined. Volkov Global Defense, Russian-influenced defense contractor, had hired Sentinel to destroy Ironwood after losing a $600 million contract. Sentinel had planted Rosalind, recruited Thorne through manipulation of his obsession with a prophecy about a woman who would make him industry king. Lydia was supposed to be that woman. When she wasn't, Thorne had eliminated her to make room for Rosalind. There's more, Owen said quietly. Marcus knew. Lydia's head snapped up. What? Not about you specifically, but he'd suspected Thorne was compromised for 6 months. Since Rosalind arrived with credentials he hadn't personally approved. He let it play out, wanted to see how deep the corruption went. He let me be branded, imprisoned. While he watched, he used you as bait to make Thorne confident, to expose the full network. Rage flooded through Lydia, white hot, blinding. Marcus had known, had suspected, had let her be destroyed anyway. For the mission, for the larger objective, for whatever operational necessity he'd convinced himself justified it. We prove it, Lydia said, voice cold, controlled. We prove everything. Thorne, Rosalind, Volkov, and Marcus's complicity. Owen nodded. That's the plan. They spent the afternoon preparing, organizing evidence, building the narrative, anticipating questions. As sunset approached, they heard it, distant but unmistakable. Helicopters. Multiple. Ironwood security. Still searching. Owen and Lydia moved deeper into the forest, away from the cabin, into terrain too rough for landing. The helicopters passed, searchlights sweeping, thermal imaging scanning, but the evidence case was shielded, and Owen and Lydia had learned to mask heat signatures using terrain and cold water. The helicopters moved on. Night fell. They didn't risk fire. Huddled together for warmth. Waited. 12 more hours until extraction. 12 more hours until they could prove everything. Lydia looked at the permanent scar, visible even in darkness. The permanent mark declaring her compromised. Soon everyone would know the truth, that the real traitor was the man who'd put it there. She closed her eyes, rested. Tomorrow, everything would change. The military helicopter arrived exactly at 0800 hours. Black, unmarked. Crew in tactical gear with no insignia. Senator Morrison was aboard, 62 years old. Former JAG officer. Sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan, you're safe now. They climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted, turned south, away from Montana, toward Washington, D.C. During the flight, Owen and Lydia presented their evidence. Systematically. Professionally. Senator Morrison listened without interruption. Reviewed documents, examined the camera footage on Lydia's drive, studied Owen's financial records. When they finished, she sat back. This is enough for federal prosecution. Espionage, conspiracy, multiple counts of accessory to murder. She looked at Lydia. And enough to clear you completely. The framing is obvious once we see the camera footage. What about Marcus Caldwell? Lydia asked. More complicated. He didn't participate in the conspiracy directly, but his decision to use you as bait without consent. She paused. That's ethically inexcusable. Legally, it's gray area. We'll present it to DOJ. Let them decide. The helicopter landed at a secure military facility outside D.C. They were processed, given clean clothes, medical examination, debriefing. Then came the waiting. 3 days while federal prosecutors built their case. 3 days while FBI arrested Thorne Caldwell and Rosalind Hayes. 3 days while Ironwood Security searched fruitlessly for fugitives who were already in federal protective custody. On the 4th day, Senator Morrison visited their safe house. Federal grand jury has indicted. Thorne Caldwell conspiracy espionage, 11 counts accessory to murder. Rosalind Hayes Kincaid, same charges, plus foreign agent violations. Richard Kincaid Sentinel, CEO conspiracy, corporate espionage. Dmitry Volkov, global defense espionage conspiracy. She paused. Marcus Caldwell has been subpoenaed to testify. No charges yet, but his conduct is under review. When is trial? Lydia asked. 6 months minimum. Federal case this complex takes time. But there's something else. Senator Hawkins and I want you to testify before Armed Services Committee. Public hearing. Televised. About private military contractor corruption and foreign infiltration. Lydia looked at Owen. He nodded. We'll testify, Lydia said. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The day before the hearing, Lydia sat in a conference room at the Senate building, preparing testimony with prosecutors. A knock at the door. Marcus Caldwell entered. Alone, no lawyers, no security. He looked older, tired. Lydia, I'd like to speak with you, privately. The prosecutors started to object. Lydia raised her hand. It's fine, give us 10 minutes. They left, reluctantly. Marcus sat across from her, looked at the brand on her forearm, the permanent mark he had authorized. I'm not here to apologize, he said, because I'm not sorry I did it. Only sorry it had to be you. Lydia said nothing, waited. I suspected Thorne was compromised 6 months before your tribunal, when Rosalind arrived, when I saw he'd bypassed background checks, when I noticed operational intelligence was leaking. He met her eyes. I could have confronted him then, could have investigated quietly. But I didn't know how deep it went, didn't know if others were involved, didn't know if it was just Thorne or a larger network. So you used me as bait. Yes. When you found the breach pattern and reported it to Thorne, I saw opportunity. If he was guilty, he'd panic. Eliminate the threat. Frame you or kill you. Either way, he'd expose himself. You let him brand me, implant me, destroy my life for operational intelligence. I let him think he'd won, so he'd get confident, make mistakes, lead me to everyone involved. Marcus's voice didn't waver. 11 contractors were dead. If sacrificing your reputation temporarily prevented the 12th death and exposed foreign infiltration of American defense contractors, I'd make that trade. Every time. Lydia leaned forward. You had a choice, Marcus. You could have told me, asked me to volunteer for the operation. I would have said yes, would have played the role willingly, but you didn't give me that choice. You just used me. If you'd known, Rosalind would have detected it. She's trained in reading deception. Only authentic suffering would convince her you were truly destroyed. You don't know that. You assumed it. You made the call that my suffering was necessary without my consent. Silence. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. I made that call, and I'd make it again. That's what command means. Making choices where everyone loses something and you pick the least worst option. That's what you tell yourself to justify it. No, it's what I know. From 30 years leading men in operations where perfect choices don't exist. Lydia stood, looked down at him. Thorne is going to prison for 25 years. Rosalind for 30. Volkov is being extradited to face espionage charges. You helped expose them. That matters. But what you did to me, using me without consent, letting me be tortured for your operation, that was wrong. And you know it. Marcus met her eyes. Yes, using you without consent was wrong. But stopping Volkov and exposing the conspiracy was right. I can't apologize for the outcome, only for the cost you paid. That's not for you to decide alone. That's the point you're missing. She walked to the door, stopped. Tomorrow I testify. I'll tell them what Thorne did, what Rosalind did, what Volkov did, and what you did. All of it. Then Congress and DOJ can decide if the ends justified your means. She left. Behind her, Marcus sat alone. The hearing, Senate Armed Services Committee. Packed gallery. Cameras everywhere. Lydia sat at the witness table. Owen beside her. Both under oath. Senator Morrison led the questioning. Ms. Brennan, please describe what happened on the day of your tribunal. Lydia did. Methodically, factually, no emotion, the branding, the implant, the detention, the escape. She showed the committee her forearm, the chemical scar compromised. This brand was applied based on fabricated evidence. Evidence created by my husband Thorne Caldwell and Sentinel operative Rosalind Hayes to cover up their conspiracy to sell American military intelligence to foreign adversaries. Gasps from the gallery. She continued, presented the camera footage, showed Rosalind and Thorne at her terminal, proved her credentials were cloned. Then Owen presented his evidence. 3 years of investigation, financial networks, 11 operations compromised, 14 contractors killed. The hearing lasted 6 hours. At the end, Senator Morrison asked one final question. Ms. Brennan, what reforms do you recommend to prevent this from happening again? Lydia had prepared for this. 3 things. First, independent external verification of all internal investigations at private military contractors. No company should investigate itself when contractor lives are at stake. She paused. Second, mandatory cooling period between accusation and punishment. 48 hours minimum. Emotions must not drive judgment. Third, accused personnel must have full access to all evidence before any tribunal. No secret evidence. No hidden accusations. Senator Morrison nodded. The Brennan Standard. We'll draft legislation incorporating these principles. The hearing adjourned. Lydia and Owen walked out to a storm of media. Cameras, questions shouted. They didn't stop. Kept walking. Got into the federal vehicle waiting. It was done. 6 months later, Federal Courthouse, Eastern District of Virginia. Thorne Caldwell stood as the jury foreman read the verdict. Count 1, conspiracy to commit espionage, guilty. Count 2 through 12, accessory to murder, guilty on all counts. Thorne's face showed nothing, but Lydia, sitting in the gallery, saw his hands tremble. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 28 years federal prison. Rosalind Hayes Kincaid received 30 years. Richard Kincaid, 18 years. Dmitry Volkov was extradited to face charges in both U.S. and allied nations. Marcus Caldwell was not charged, but he resigned from Ironwood. The company underwent federal oversight, new leadership, new protocols. The Brennan Standard became law, applied to all private military contractors with federal contracts. 1 year after the tribunal, Lydia stood in front of Ironwood's main building. She'd been invited back, not as employee, as consultant. The new CEO, external hire with no ties to the Caldwell family, had asked her to oversee security reform implementation. She'd accepted, on her terms. Inside the main briefing hall had changed. The memorial wall now included new names. The 11 contractors who died in operations compromised by Thorne and Rosalind: Davis, Reeves, Chen, Morrison, Pack, Schultz, Williams, Kowalski, Diaz, Thompson, Hayes, each with a plaque. Betrayed by those they trusted, avenged by those who remembered. Lydia placed her hand on the wall, felt the cold metal, a voice behind her. Ms. Brennan, she turned, young analyst, maybe 24, nervous. I'm Sarah Mitchell, junior analyst. I wanted to thank you for the Brennan Standard for making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Lydia nodded. Just doing what should have been done from the start. Verifying before judging. Evidence before emotion. Sarah hesitated. Then the brand. Does it still hurt? Lydia looked at her forearm, the permanent mark. Dark blue letters that would never fade. Every day, she said honestly. But it also reminds me why the work matters. Why verification matters. Why we can't rush to judgment. She pulled down her sleeve. Covered the mark. Some scars we keep visible. Some we cover. But all of them teach us. If we let them. Sarah nodded, understanding. Lydia walked to the conference room. New security team waiting. Protocols to implement. Systems to improve. The work continued. The mission continued. But now it was on her terms. With her standards. With the changes that ensured no one else would carry a false brand. That evening, Lydia's apartment. Small. Efficient. No reminders of her marriage to Thorne. No photographs of the life she'd lost. Just work. Purpose. Forward motion. A knock at the door. Owen. She let him in. He carried takeout. Thai food, their father's favorite. They ate in comfortable silence. Then Owen spoke. Margaret called me today. Lydia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What did she want? To apologize again. She's been calling once a month for a year. I keep telling her you're not ready. I'm not. I know, but Lydia, she was manipulated. Rosalind's psyops were professional grade. Margaret genuinely believed you were guilty because Rosalind made her believe it. I know that intellectually doesn't change how it felt. Watching her believe lies over 15 years of raising me. Owen nodded, set down his fork. Dad used to say forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you, so you can move forward without carrying their weight. Lydia smiled slightly. Dad said a lot of things, doesn't make them all true. No, but this one might be. Silence, then Lydia spoke. Maybe someday. Not today, but someday. That's enough. They finished dinner. Owen left. Lydia cleaned up. Before bed, she stood in front of the mirror, looked at her reflection, at the blue letters that would never fade. Compromise once it had defined her. The mark of false judgment. The proof of systematic betrayal. Now it was something else. A reminder. A purpose. A promise. She'd been compromised by lies. Broken by false evidence. Destroyed by people she trusted. But she'd survived. Proven the truth. Changed the system. The brand still said compromise to anyone who saw it. But to Lydia it said something else. Verified, tested, proven. She pulled on a long-sleeve shirt, covered the mark. Tomorrow more work, more protocols, more training for analysts who needed to understand that verification came before judgment. That evidence mattered more than assumptions. Tonight, rest. She lay down, closed her eyes. For the first time in 18 months, Lydia Brennan slept without nightmares. The brand remained. The implant had been surgically removed 6 months ago, after federal prosecutors confirmed she'd need no further tracking. But the scar from the brand would never fade. She'd carry it forever. A permanent reminder that truth survives lies. That one person asking questions can force accountability. That justice, however delayed, eventually comes. That some flames don't destroy. They forge. Lydia had been 12 when she froze in fear, 27 when she was destroyed by false judgment, 28 when she proved them all wrong. Now at 29, she was exactly where she needed to be. Not broken, not bitter, not destroyed, whole. The brand said compromised, but Lydia Brennan knew better. She was tempered steel, tested by fire, proven by truth. And that was enough. 2 years after the tribunal, Ironwood Security Collective had transformed. The Brennan Standard was industry law. Marcus Caldwell lived in quiet retirement, his legacy forever marked by the choice he made to use an innocent woman as bait. Thorne Caldwell served his sentence. No visitors, no parole hearings for 20 years. Rosalind Hayes Kincaid cooperated with prosecutors. Her testimony helped dismantle Sentinel's operations across 3 continents. Owen Brennan returned to operational work, this time for a different company. One with verified ethics. Margaret Brennan sent letters monthly. Lydia read them. Didn't respond, not yet, but she kept them, all of them, because someday maybe forgiveness would be possible. And Lydia, she became chief security analyst for the Federal Oversight Committee monitoring private military contractors, making sure the Brennan Standard was enforced, making sure no one else carried a brand they didn't deserve. The scar remained visible. She stopped covering it. Let people see. Let them ask. Because every time someone asked about the brand, she got to tell them, this is what false judgment looks like. This is why evidence matters. This is why we verify before we condemn. And slowly, one conversation at a time, the industry changed. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. And Lydia Brennan Mark tested, proven, made sure it stayed that way. Some scars tell stories, hers told the truth. And truth in the end was all that mattered.